What up guys, I'm last Roman. Today I will talk about Gracchus' brother. The reeds along the banks of the Tiber River sway in the wind. Perhaps in the final moments of Tiberius Gracchus's life, he might have recalled his speech to the people of Rome at the amphitheater on the day he was elected as tribune. The birds and beasts have their own nests, and after a day's toil, they return to rest and recuperate. But those who fought and died for Rome have nothing besides air and sunlight. They have no houses, no land, and are homeless and destitute, drifting like duckweed with their wives and children, wandering to make a living. These soldiers were deceived by their commanders to defend the altars of their ancestors, yet none of them have an inherited altar or ancestral tomb. They were promised a bright and grand future that could never be fulfilled, and they fought, even to death, for those who live in wealth and luxury. Even if they conquer the world, they still do not own a patch of land to call their own. The crowd was moved, and the cheers that filled the amphitheater were as overwhelming as the roar of the sea. The applause was thunderous, and every commoner praised this 31-year-old nobleman. The young and handsome Tiberius was at the height of his popularity, eager to initiate reforms to change Rome. The Gracchus family. Tiberius was born in 163 BC into the illustrious Gracchus family. His father, also named Tiberius, served as a Roman consul, and his maternal grandfather was the famous African conqueror Scipio Africanus. His mother, Cornelia, was renowned for her wisdom. Even the Egyptian pharaoh Ptolemy VIII proposed to her, offering her a crown, but she gracefully declined. After the death of their father, the three Gracchus siblings were raised by their single mother Cornelia, who was dedicated to ensuring that her children would grow up to be exemplary Romans, inheritors not only of the Gracchus name, but also of the spirit of their ancestors. If a Roman were to see the two brothers walking shoulder to shoulder down the road, he might not be able to tell them apart by appearance, as they look like twins cast from the same mold. Some marveled at the stark contrast in their temperaments. Tiberius was gentle and elegant, always calm and composed, speaking with the orderly grace of a gentleman. His brother Gaius was passionate and eloquent, like the lively Vesuvius, always brimming with words and overflowing with emotions. A graceful and beautiful young man, raising a cup and gazing at the blue sky, as pure as a jade tree standing in the wind. If someone approached to chat with them, they would surely exclaim how both brothers seemed born to be statesmen, brave, upright, and eloquent. Translation. The Treaty of Numantia. Let's start with the elder brother, Tiberius, in chronological order. At that time, the chief senator, Appius Claudius, wished to marry his daughter to Tiberius, who gladly accepted. When Appius returned home and informed his wife of this, she exclaimed, "You want Tiberius as your son-in-law? Why are you in such a rush?" This reaction reflects the high reputation that this young talent had already earned. The young Tiberius served in the army of his brother-in-law Scipio Aemilianus and fought on the front lines in what is now North Africa during the Carthaginian campaign. Eager to distinguish himself, Tiberius led the charge in the siege of Carthage, being among the first to scale the city walls. His fame spread back to Rome, and he was appointed as the quaestor to the consul Mancinus. Although this transfer was supposed to be a positive step for Tiberius, Mancinus's luck was extremely poor. Under his command, the Roman army suffered repeated defeats and was eventually surrounded by the Numantines, in what is now Spain. The Numantines only agreed to negotiate with Tiberius, the son of the former consul, rather than with Mancinus. Negotiating was no easy task, though Tiberius did his best to preserve the interests and lives of the Romans, earning the gratitude of soldiers and citizens alike. He was criticized by some as cowardly. The Senate even considered declaring the peace treaty invalid, marking the beginning of Tiberius's conflict with the Senate. The reforms of Tiberius. For the people suffer in times of both prosperity and decline. Although Rome emerged victorious in the Punic Wars, the fruits of victory brought no benefit to the people. The ravages of war left many farmers bankrupt, turning them into proletarians, and soon, starvation spread across the land. Each time the Romans conquered a new territory, part of the land was auctioned off publicly, and another part was designated as public land. Ideally, every impoverished Roman citizen could receive a portion of this land from the state treasury. However, as the greed of the nobles and landowners grew, they began using other citizens' names to acquire land at low prices, swallowing up vast estates. This situation resembled a period of skyrocketing real estate prices when wealthy people in first-tier cities hoard property through fake divorces or purchasing in others' names. When Tiberius traveled to Numantia and passed through Etruria, he noticed that the rural population was dwindling. Landowners were driving out free citizens and replacing them with large numbers of foreign slaves to work their estates. The displaced Romans could only flock to the capital, becoming the urban poor, struggling to make a living. Tiberius's childhood friend, Licinius, pointed to the desolate estates and said to him, "If Rome is strong but the Romans are homeless, this strength is meaningless. Change it, Gracchus. This is our mission." Translation. It was here that they conceived the future plan for land reform. Although Livius, known to the people as the Wise, abandoned the idea due to opposition from the authorities, Tiberius and his close friend Marcus stood out and were simultaneously elevated to the position of tribune. The office of tribune, responsible for protecting the interests of the Roman people, was often used by noble youths as a stepping stone for advancement. As soon as Tiberius took office, he hurriedly introduced his bill. The Roman herald announced to the people of Rome, "Citizens, I am here to announce an important decision. The promulgation of the agrarian law. According to this law, individuals and their relatives will be strictly limited in the amount of state-owned land they can lease, and any land exceeding the prescribed limit must be returned to the state. Additionally, new regulations in livestock farming will limit the number of animals individuals can own. Those citizens who own excess land must return the surplus to the state. The state will then redistribute the reclaimed land to those farmers who truly need it, ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to engage in farming and production." Judging by its content, this was not a radical bill. It appeared to be designed to prevent landowners from excessively occupying state-owned land through the use of relatives and freed slaves, and to provide a place for dispossessed Romans. Other senators could not openly oppose the bill on moral grounds. However, Tiberius's subsequent proposal struck a nerve with the senators, provoking strong opposition. This proposal also became an excuse for the senators to oppose the entire bill. Tiberius wanted to include in the bill a provision for providing startup funds to asset-stripped Romans, enabling them to engage in the cultivation of olives, grapes, and livestock. Touching the landowners' interests meant touching their very souls. To counter Tiberius, the landowners began hiring assassins, forcing Tiberius to carry a short sword for self-defense whenever he went out. They also sought out his close friend Marcus for lobbying, knowing that as another tribune, Marcus could exercise his veto power to block Tiberius's reforms. The two engaged in fierce debate, with neither willing to back down. Tiberius, seeing no other option, attempted to remove Marcus from office through a citizen assembly. When the removal was about to take effect, Tiberius paused the procedure and approached Marcus, pleading with him one last time not to obstruct the reforms. But Marcus, fearing the powerful forces behind him, could not comply. With the passage of the removal proposal, the crowd immediately dragged Marcus onto the platform and began beating him. Many Romans believed that Tiberius's obstinacy had undermined the sacred duties of the tribune. In his defense, Tiberius argued, the tribune is sacred and inviolable, but if a tribune falls to the point of oppressing the people and we cannot remove him, is that not an absurd situation? Translation. IV. The death of Tiberius. At dawn, a soothsayer arrived. The Romans believed that birds could be used for augury to foresee the future. The pigeons brought by the soothsayer all refused to leave their cages, except for one that flew out but did not eat a single grain of food. Tiberius felt a sense of dread, anticipating that his death was near. Assassins hired by the landowners frequently lurked near his home at night, attempting to break in. The people of Rome set up tents around his house, trying to protect him. Even so, whenever the people began to gather, he would eagerly run out to the assembly site. At one such gathering, a senator named Fulvius squeezed up to him and grabbed his sleeve, warning, "The landowners have already sent assassins to this assembly. You need to leave quickly." Tiberius immediately informed those around him of the situation and raised his hand to signal a warning to those farther away who couldn't hear him. However, this gesture was misrepresented by his opponents as a sign that he intended to declare himself king. Senators and their followers, armed with clubs, charged at Tiberius and his group with overwhelming force. As his companions tried to pull Tiberius away to escape, he remained concerned about the safety of his colleagues. Over 300 people died on the spot. Tiberius tripped over a corpse, and just as he tried to get up, he was attacked again and struck repeatedly with an iron bar. The senator grabbed hold of Tiberius's toga to prevent him from escaping, while others beat his limbs and organs with clubs. The blood he spat out stained the marble red, and the entire assembly area was filled with the stench of blood. His body was then dragged and thrown into the Tiber River. When news of Tiberius's death reached Numantia in Spain, his brother-in-law, Appius Claudius, stared blankly in the direction of Rome and slowly recited, "What is past cannot be changed, what is to come can still be pursued." V. Gaius. After his brother's death, Gaius remained in hiding at home to avoid the turmoil. One night, he had a dream in which his brother spoke to him, causing Gaius to wake up in a cold sweat, restless in his bed. "Gaius, how can you hesitate? It is our duty to speak for the people. How can you waver?" When Gaius was elected as quaestor, his political enemies, recalling his brother, tried every means to prevent him from being elected as tribune. However, this could not stop the support of the Roman people. Citizens from all over Italy flocked to Rome to cast their votes for Gaius, blocking the streets and alleys completely. People even climbed onto rooftops, shouting the name of Gracchus. Upon taking office, Gaius immediately sought to revive the agrarian law that his brother had introduced but left unfinished, even proposing to sell grain to the poor at reduced prices. But his reforms did not stop there. He demanded that soldiers' clothing be paid for with public funds, raised the minimum age for military service to 17, and aimed to reduce the burdens on the Roman people. He meticulously designed beautiful roads for Rome, straight roads that stretched across the countryside. For these achievements, Gaius received widespread admiration from the Roman people. After the fall of Carthage, the once prosperous city was reduced to ashes. Gaius rebuilt a new city on the site of Carthage and spent his second term as tribune in Africa. However, during this time, the political situation in Rome underwent dramatic changes. Gaius's political enemy, Livius, spread lies and proposed unrealistic laws, deceitfully winning over voters. While the agrarian law required farmers to pay rent for their land, Livius promised tax exemptions. Gaius proposed building 3 new cities, while Livius claimed he would build 12, offering free rent and relocation allowances to all farmers. Yet, when Livius's proposals became law, none were actually implemented, as the Senate's true goal was simply to remove the defiant Gaius from power. The opposition continued to exploit ominous signs to defame and sabotage Gaius's work on rebuilding Carthage. After Gaius's term ended, in 121 BC, at a citizens' assembly on the Capitoline Hill, a massive crowd gathered as the people of Rome prepared to decide the fate of the city of Carthage. However, during the sacrificial rituals, an incident occurred. A staff member holding the sacrificial offerings angered the crowd and was stabbed to death by an enraged person. Gaius lamented that this act by one of his supporters had given the opposition an excuse to resort to violence. The consul Opimius, who opposed Gaius, invoked the Senate's final decree, declaring Gaius's supporters to be enemies of Rome, to be killed on sight. The next day, Opimius, fully armed, assembled a heavily armed force brought in from Crete and Greece in the Roman Forum. Gaius refused to arm himself, dressing as usual in his toga. His wife, one hand clutching his toga and the other holding their child, pleaded with him, "Gaius, whether you are a tribune or a legislator, I do not want you to join this fight. Going there unarmed will do nothing but bring you harm." Gaius turned back to her with a carefree smile and said, "This is our mission." She tried her best to grab hold of his toga, but collapsed to the ground in silence. Gaius made a final offer of reconciliation to the consul, which was coldly rejected. He and his supporters retreated to the Aventine Hill, where they were easily overrun by the Roman army, leading to a gruesome massacre. Gaius initially intended to take his own life in the Temple of Diana, but was dissuaded by a friend. Fleeing with a slave, he reached a forest on the northern slope, where, cornered and with no way out, both master and servant took their own lives. The purge that followed implicated over 3,000 people. Gaius's property was completely confiscated, and any commemoration of the brothers' actions was branded as anti-Roman. The deaths of the Gracchi brothers also signaled the impending crisis facing the Roman Republic. The land issue lost any chance of a peaceful resolution, and Roman society began to spiral into a state of heated conflict. Epilogue. The Mother. Gradually, the place where the brothers died became a sacred site, with travelers quietly laying bright red carnations in their memory. Their mother, Cornelia, lived in seclusion by the Bay of Naples, often visited by guests. Whether poets or scholars, she warmly welcomed them all. Many years later, a Roman boy passed by a country estate. A kind old woman, with a gentle smile, offered him refreshing grapes. She took the boy's small hand, wanting to tell him the story of 2 young men who, in her eyes, remained forever young and full of vigor. Like many single-parent families, the kind mother Cornelia taught her sons to treat the world with kindness, but they lacked a stern father to warn them of the dangers of the world. The Gracchi brothers demonstrated with their lives that even when the world strikes with pain, one can still respond with song. As we look back on history, young people are always full of passion and a desire for change. Both the present and the future are tied to them. Yet the entrenched elites, blinded by this dazzling light, resist desperately.